He was there. He responded to the scene after the planes went into the building. He saw people jumping out of the towers from maybe 70 or 80 stories out there, up above. There were reports of a man and a woman holding hands as they jumped from the building to try to escape, and he was there when the buildings came down.
I guess the scariest part was being covered in dust and not being able to see, and breathing through my hat.
You couldn't see anything?
No, you couldn't see anything. It was pitch black.
And you were breathing through your police hat?
My hat, yes, because that's all I had with me.
The people who were jumping, did you see them fall?
Unfortunately, yes. It's not something I would like to talk about, and unfortunately, it's not something I'll ever be able to forget about. At first, you thought it was pieces of the building falling, until you realized that they had arms and legs. And at this point, I really wouldn't want to say anything more about it.
The World Trade Center towers, which are now mostly rubble, where once there were these symbols of Lower Manhattan, are more than symbols. This is where people live their real workaday lives, where they take their children. And this is part of a big live city. Absolutely.
And everywhere you went today, you saw people looking at this cloud of smoke clustered around radios. People had car doors open with the radios blasting. People gathered around to hear what had happened. I spoke with one man. You also saw a lot of people rushing to pick up their kids from school and from daycare. I talked to Michael Ruddy, who was just picking up his son, his 6-year-old son, from school, and he mentioned that until last year, his wife worked at the World Trade Center. What did you tell your son?
Excuse me. I'm very emotional about this. I explained to him that something very terrible had happened, that the World Trade Center, which he knows very well, because he used to call it Mama's building. I told him that it had been hit by an airplane and had now been destroyed, and it doesn't exist anymore. He's, I think, concerned because he sees how sad I am. He kind of sees the sadness.
A New Yorker who shared that experience earlier today with NPR's Melissa Block.
Here in Washington, less than an hour after the second plane crashed into the World Trade Center, a third aircraft sliced into the Pentagon. Dozens of people were sent to area hospitals. Many of the seats of power in the nation's capital, the White House, the Capitol, the Treasury, and State Departments were evacuated. And 2 hours later, United Airlines confirmed a fourth plane crash near Pittsburgh, with no reports of survivors among the 45 on board. NPR's Peter Kenyon joins us now. Peter, let's back up to the crash at the Pentagon. What do we know about that so far?
Well, the initial reports were fairly sketchy, but after it soon became apparent that this was a very heavy hit that the building had taken, and the five-sided building, one side of it was just sliced from top to bottom. There was a huge gaping hole and a bright orange fireball, and one side of it had been punctured heavily. Just been some renovations there recently, which was in some ways a blessing because they put in blast-proof glass and things like that. But there was still a potential for very heavy injuries and possibly fatalities. Military officials said the fire was intense. Hospitals reported at least 40 victims, some in critical condition, 7 in critical as of mid-afternoon. It was apparently hard for rescue workers to get in there because of the heavy fire and smoke. There was a plane, an American Airlines plane, of 64 people aboard. One FBI official on the scene said he believed that was the plane that suddenly veered off route and ran into the Pentagon.
So to be clear about it, a commercial airliner hits the Pentagon this morning.
That's right. Just right into it. Often there's a helicopter pad nearby, and it just went right in there.
Now, a lot of people in the nation's capital shocked. It seemed to be an attack not just on the military at the Pentagon, but on the very symbol of the United States.
I think it was, and I think the fact that it came so soon in conjunction with the World Trade Center attacks that made it even more devastating for people. Rapid evacuation, as you mentioned at the top, of all of these buildings. And on any given day, you know, a lot of the people here in town are tourists, and those in front of the White House were being yelled at by agitated Secret Service agents. They didn't quite know what to do. Reporters were finding congressmen and senators hanging around on the lawn of the Capitol because they'd been evacuated. The president traveled from Florida to Louisiana, where he made a brief statement, and then on to Nebraska, where he convened a meeting of the National Security Council. And Karen Hughes today said she repeated his pledge that they would use every resource, first to help the victims and then to track down whoever's responsible for this.
We have 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center. We have one that